The Iowa State Fair is the biggest thing in Iowa.
60,000 Iowans can't be wrong. It's Thrill Day at the State Fair.
It encompasses life in Iowa, but also brings everybody together in a great way.
It provides opportunities for both young and old to fulfill some of their dreams.
I have tried for years to win this contest.
The livestock, it is still a place to see cattle and hogs that are top of the industry.
Congratulations, young man. Nice job.
Everything that makes this state what it is, I think you can find here. And that goes for agriculture, but it also goes for food, and it goes for entertainment, and it goes for people.
This is a magnificent barn, and it's almost as though the barn has arms, and it just reaches out and hugs you and says, "You're a part of this now."
We don't have the mountains of Colorado, we don't have the lakes of Minnesota, but we have a celebration that people have put their heart and soul into to make it the best state fair in the country.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's showtime.
And it's a place that many of us have come since we were small children, and we see things that are familiar, that haven't changed much since we were small children, and other things that are new and innovative and different about the fair. And of course, that's, in a sense, what history is about. It's about the things that change and the things that endure.
On top of all that, it's just fun. It really is.
Funding for this program was provided by Friends, the Iowa PBS Foundation, as well as generations of families and friends who feel passionate about the programs they watch on Iowa PBS.
Decision is pretty monumental. The first time since World War II that the Iowa State Fair has been canceled for this year. Sorry to report that, but it is what it is. So.
The early months of the COVID-19 pandemic were a time of great uncertainty. The Iowa State Fair Board had to decide whether or not to hold a fair in 2020. The health and safety of all the attendees, vendors, volunteers, and staff was at risk. And they stood to lose money either way. The fair had only missed 5 years in its 166-year history. What would summer in Iowa be like without the fair? Would it still be summer? Would it still be Iowa? To understand why that was such a difficult decision to make, we have to go back to 1853. Iowa was a brand new state and growing fast. 150,000 new residents had just settled here, hoping to start a new life. Homesteaders from the eastern United States and Europe seeking land, opportunity, and religious freedom west of the Mississippi River. The 1850s were a transformative time in American history. Many people sought to make our nation a better place. Movements like women's suffrage and the abolition of slavery were gaining ground. Most of the early settlers were farmers attracted to Iowa's fertile soil. How would farmers seize the untapped potential of what could be grown and raised here?
Most farmers at the time are raising whatever they can get from livestock and crops. And so How do you improve things? Let's bring people together. Let's have a festival and share ideas and knowledge.
Back east, counties and states had begun holding agricultural fairs to improve livestock and crops. The Berkshire Agricultural Society organized what many accept as the first American fair in Pittsfield, Massachusetts in 1810.
If you were trying to boost your agricultural economy, one way to do that was to bring farmers together to compare notes and to trade knowledge, but also to compete against one another. That if you set a high bar, you want to grow a better ear of corn than your neighbor.
By 1853, every free state in the Union had a state agricultural society, except Iowa. Thomas Clagett from Keokuk and J.M. Schaefer from Fairfield believed Iowa should have a state fair. In December of 1853, they invited Iowa's county societies to meet for the purposes of starting a statewide agricultural society. J.M. Schaefer wrote, "Shall the resources of other states be developed, their wealth increased, and their people elevated in the scale of intellectual being, and ours stand still?" Iowa would not be left behind. Clagett and Schaefer were not farmers, but they both understood the economic benefit of having a statewide exhibition.
In the late 19th century, a lot of Americans believed that the Midwest was the region of the country that was likely to emerge as the most successful and influential part of the United States. It had vast resources and it had growing cities like Chicago.
Plans came together, and the Iowa State Agricultural Society was founded. Their first order of business was planning a state fair. Schaefer and Clagett imagined a grand event held in Fairfield, which, incidentally, was called Fairfield before it was ever home to a fair. With a budget of $323, they decided to begin a 3-day event on October 25, 1854.
Getting here would have been a huge undertaking. October is a fairly dry month. Harvest would probably be over, so farmers would have grain and pumpkins and so forth to come and show. They didn't have hogs separated by breed. They were just pigs, just swine. Whereas chickens, I think they had 45 breeds of chicken that were on display. And of course the horses were a big deal. And the cattle, there were lots of breeds of cattle, and there were sheep.
You want to showcase animals, you want to showcase crops, you want to showcase machinery, and you want to showcase domestic articles. So even from those earliest days, the Iowa State Fair was promoting improved products and work by men and women.
The 1854 fair was first and foremost a scientific agricultural exhibition. Having fun was not the goal, yet. But it was impressive, with unusual and entertaining events, like a dog and bear fight and a ladies' equestrian competition.
It wasn't unusual to see a woman riding a horse, but to have a group of women competing was a pretty interesting event for a group of Iowans in 1854 to see.
And basically they rode the horse around the track as fast as they could while remaining ladylike and in control.
And Miss Fuller from Keokuk is the champion, but the crowd attending and watching also is enamored by the skill of a very young woman, Miss Hodges of Johnson County of Iowa City.
They felt that her riding was thrilling and exciting. And then the judges said, well, she may be thrilling and exciting, but that's not proper ladylike equestrianism. And we, the judges, say that this other woman should be given the top prize. And the crowd was outraged.
Even in the very first state fair, there's concern, upset about, did the judges get it right?
The Fairfield Ledger declared the event a success. The attendance was large. For several days before the fair, strangers commenced pouring into Fairfield by scores. Such a concourse of people never before assembled in Iowa. We think we are safe in estimating the number at 7,000 or 8,000.
I think frontier life was so difficult and so isolated that it must have been thrilling, right, to see hundreds or even thousands of your fellow settlers. I think it would have been probably the most exciting event in a lot of people's lives to attend those early fairs.
It was so exciting and successful that they would do it again in Fairfield in 1855. Admission was only 25 cents, which was too much for some folks. Almost 100 visitors used the same admission ticket, slipping it back over the fence so others could enter without paying. The next year, the fair moved to Muscatine with a more reliable ticketing system and welcomed 15,000 visitors. During its first 25 years, the fair would hopscotch around eastern Iowa and be held in 10 different cities.
Part of the reason was to spread the fair around. As I say, a lot of the early fairs were very local. So by moving the fair to different cities every couple of years, you could attract a different group of Iowans to at least occasionally have the opportunity to come to the fair. But it also had drawbacks because it meant that every couple of years you had to create and fit up a new fairground. And as the fair got bigger and bigger, that became more and more of a liability, more and more of a drawback.
While educating the farmer was the main goal of the early fairs, it was the competition that really excited people. The competitions were designed to inspire Iowans to improve their products to the point where the quality would gain national recognition. Winners would receive awards in the form of silver cups, plates, diplomas, and ribbons. The Iowa State Agricultural Society thought this ought to be enough. Turns out, Iowans in the 19th century were better motivated by cold, hard cash. With the stakes rising, competition intensified. At the same time, the fair had difficulty recruiting enough qualified judges.
Sometimes exhibitors felt as though the judges' rulings were mistaken, they were wrong. And if you were a professional livestock breeder, winning a blue ribbon might really make a difference to your reputation. It might make a difference to your income.
The Burgess brothers, one of their stallions wins an award at the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. So they're that big a deal, and yet the Iowa State Fair in the 1880s, early 1890s has barred them from participating because one of their employees has insulted and hung a judge in effigy. So there's those nuggets of little stories that let you know that not everything was always rosy at the Iowa State Fair, even in its earliest days.
That tension endures throughout the fair, and I think still to this day. There are the critics' picks, and then there are the fan favorites, and that's one of the things that the fair is about, right? There are judges who bestow ribbons on prize-winning exhibits, and I'm sure sometimes the people looking at come to a different conclusion.
Horses were important to farm families. They needed strong draft horses for pulling farm equipment, and they also needed good riding horses. How could judges compare the quality of one horse to another and showcase horsemanship in driving? They could hold a race. In the early days, every fairground had a racetrack. Fairgoers found horse racing to be thrilling, despite being illegal in those days. But if something made for better farming practices, a pragmatic Iowan would say it's okay. Call it trials of speed for the improvement of stock, and they were off. Legally betting on the horses would not be allowed in Iowa for another century.
Horse races may have attracted some gambling at times off the side, but was really a way to showcase the skills of the animals, the strength of the animals, the improved breeds of the time.
Competitors in all areas enjoyed winning money for their achievements, but the amount depended on whether or not the fair was having a good year. When the weather was stormy, wet, and disagreeable, people didn't come. Gate admissions and entrance fees weren't paid, and there wouldn't be enough money to pay all the premiums. And then, in 1861, the Civil War almost kept the fair from happening at all.
The Iowa State Fair is always subject to outside influences, and that would repeat itself in Iowa State Fair history.
After the 1855 fair, Thomas Claggett felt strongly that the prosperity of the Iowa State Fair depended on a central and permanent location. The idea was discussed a number of times in the years that followed, and finally, in 1879, the fair moved to Des Moines.
So Des Moines' blossoming city at that time. The first fairgrounds are actually on the west side of town near present-day 42nd Street and Grand, out toward the west side of Des Moines, and Ingersoll area as well. But if you are from a small town, mid-sized town, Des Moines is a big city. To be at a place in a city that has electric light eventually, or gas light, to see the latest that's being developed in American technology, that would be a hotel or a place with running water, would be pretty exciting.
Des Moines was honored to host the fair and went to great lengths to welcome visitors. A bandwagon was hired to play on city streets to promote fair attendance. Musical acts and balloon ascension races entertained the crowds. Cattle and poultry entries were the largest ever. The desire to establish a permanent grounds remained. Des Moines proved to be a good choice, with its central location, growing population, and railroad system. The Iowa legislature responded by allocating $50,000 to purchase land, and the citizens of Des Moines raised money to match.
I'd argue the most monumental decision that happens with the Iowa State Fair is the purchase of the Calvin and Arminta Thornton farm that is today between 30th and 36th and University and Dean on the east side of Des Moines.
And the Iowa State Fair had finally found a permanent home. With land newly purchased, the Agricultural Society had work to do to get ready for the 1886 fair in September. Buildings were built, including Pioneer Hall, which is still in use today. Trees were planted, and a half-mile track was laid out. In just a few years, they would add hotels, electric lights, parks, roadways, and walks.
There was a desire to make it seem permanent and to give it a sense of kind of civicness, if you like, if it was going to be in Iowa's biggest city, it ought to also be a kind of urban event or a civic event. So the first permanent structures were some of the largest. The Exposition Hall would have been the largest structure most Iowans would ever see. It was larger than any barn in the state, and it would have been the largest structure just about in Des Moines. Again, all out of timber, though, all carpentry, because that was the labor available and that was the material that was available at the time. The Exposition Hall was modeled, maybe subconsciously, but certainly modeled after the Crystal Palace, the 1851 London building that was sort of the grandfather of the World Expositions.
The people that are helping do those buildings are some of those reform groups too. The Iowa Women's Suffrage Association wants to have a building, and the Women's Christian Temperance Union wants to have a building in those earliest days. So again, that idea of reform and improvement is still being promoted at the new Iowa State Fairgrounds.
And then the people organizing the fair realized that in order to attract people to the fair, it might be advantageous to have more entertainments.
Fair organizers worked hard to stay true to their original vision, a strictly educational exposition. Fairgoers, though, have always been keen to indulge in entertainment and willing to pay for it. With money to be made, vendors would still set up attractions, only outside the grounds. Eventually, J.M. Schaefer admitted the modern fair needed to offer more than just education. He He said, "The day of the American people is past to look upon pumpkins and small onions. We are living in a fast age, and attractions and humbugs are the order of the day. The bigger the humbug, the more we take to it. We hope to give such an exhibition that will please and tickle people." Money talks, and since the fair couldn't profit from things that happened on the other side of the fence, they invited the least offensive sideshows inside, but in their own section, the Midway.
The Midway is one of the most fascinating stories about the fair, and it too goes back to the 1893 exposition in Chicago. The Midway at the Columbian Exposition was a park where the city let just kind of anyone come and sell anything. The first Ferris wheel was part of the Chicago Midway. The Midway at the State Fair was designed exactly for that, to bring in outside vendors, to make money by renting space to them, and to basically let the vendors do almost whatever they wanted to make money off of fairgoers.
Games of chance are coming in as well, though Iowans have a long fear of gambling, and in fact, bingo was illegal in Iowa through the 1970s. So gambling may be taking place, but even games of chance are viewed with moral concern.
For many, the Midway is a place of wonder and excitement. A place to experience things that are new, exotic, and strange. Others would find it repugnant. There would often be debate over how much was too much and whether or not it went too far.
Burlesque began to be a big Midway draw, one that, of course, drew a lot of controversy and a lot of anger about the slipping morality of the fair.
In the 1930s, there's a burlesque dancer, Jade Rodora. In 1935, a legislator from Lamar's has heard that she is taking off all her clothes. And this is terribly scandalous. And when you want to talk about cheap entertainment, there are naked women in a show at the Iowa State Fair, and the Des Moines Register and the Des Moines Tribune both run photos of Ms. Rodora, and even those photos that run in the newspaper are pretty scandalous for 1935. So you've got this period where you want to have wholesome entertainment, but the boundaries are being pushed in different ways, even through the 1920s, 1930s at the Iowa State Fair.
Fairgoers also took great pleasure in danger, mayhem, and destruction. Enormous crowds would gather in the grandstand to see a person dive from a 40-foot platform into a bucket. A human cannonball. Or to witness the eruption of Mount Vesuvius and the fall of Pompeii.
Yeah, the disaster spectacles were enormously popular. They were the grandstand's main attraction for decades, and they were staged by large pyrotechnic companies, usually out of Chicago or some other big city. And these spectacles toured the country. People seemed to take a kind of morbid fascination, I think, with the prospect of seeing a recreation of an earthquake or a volcanic eruption or a catastrophic battle from history.
Many of these spectacles eventually fell out of favor as people lost their taste for celebrating trauma and loss. But over-the-top entertainment would continue to be a mainstay for thrill-seeking fairgoers. Perhaps the most iconic feat came from Iowan Joe Connolly, who offered the fair a unique opportunity.
So he goes to the Agricultural Society and says, "I would like to stage a locomotive crash in 1896.
His plan was simple. Lay down some tracks, find a couple train engines destined for the trash heap, and crash them into each other. Joe's show played out just like the action movies of today. There was a conflict, in this case, politics.
So the idea of gold versus silver is a big political issue. One of the locomotives is called the Gold Bug. The other locomotive is called the Silver Bug.
And of course, there was a heroic star. a train engineer who would start the locomotive and jump off at the precise moment it achieved speed, all culminating in an explosive ending.
I'm sure it was exciting to see in 1896 if you'd come to Des Moines, and it was. It was one of the biggest days of the fair in history up to that time.
Estimated attendance was 50 to 60,000, and many watched from building roofs near the grandstand. Nothing quite finishes the day off like explosions or fireworks, a spectacle that continues to this day. Despite record crowds for the train crash, at the end of the 19th century, the fair again struggled with attendance. External factors always play a role. In 1898, Omaha announced it was going to have the Trans-Mississippi and International Expo, so the Agricultural Society made the decision to cancel the Iowa State Fair for the first time in its history. A week later, the United States declared war on Spain, and the fairgrounds became a military encampment. The fair returned in 1899 with a century-closing exposition. The grounds were well established in Des Moines, and a new era of prosperity was underway. It was time to make some improvements.
So the fair organizers realized that they basically had to up their game. And they first paved the streets, which was a huge improvement. And they also realized that the barns themselves had to go from being something that was temporary and just agricultural into something that was more permanent, more monumental, and that reflected the fact that even though this was an agricultural event, it was taking place in Iowa's largest city. The barns are mostly symmetrical, they're formal. When you walk into them, you might feel a little bit like you're walking into a county courthouse or something. Once you go inside the barns, they are all about ventilation and light. They're all built with fairly cheap metal roofing and structure, but the skin around the barns is brick and terracotta. The names of the barns are etched in limestone. A much more formal language of architecture, and one that really relates more to the fact that this is in Des Moines. It's in the biggest city in Iowa, and it's an urban event. And that really helped take the fair from this collection of shacks on a muddy site into something that we recognize almost as an extension of the Des Moines street grid.
The Livestock Pavilion was the first example of this new standard of architecture on the fairgrounds.
It's an arena. It's a place where you're watching competition, and it's some of the best entertainment at the fair. I think that's part of the logic behind the Livestock Pavilion, that the fair did go from something that was very much about farmers comparing notes to something that people came to see, that became more of a spectacle.
And then, the Agriculture Building, the most formal of the fair's brick buildings.
It has a really overly grand entrance that faces onto the fair's main intersection and really celebrates the fact that what's going on in there is this really important thing for the state. The best of the state's agriculture is getting displayed and shown, and it's a monumental structure that really dignifies that.
There was also the need for a large gathering spot that could seat thousands of people and be home to different kinds of spectacles, concerts, demonstrations, and races. The grandstand became a focal point for the modernization of the fairgrounds.
Originally a timber structure, like many of the other older structures on the fair, it deteriorated, proved inadequate for the crowds. And in the early 1900s, they built the center section of the grandstand, a steel structure that was designed to be curved, both so that everyone had a good view of the finish line and so that they could use it for concerts as a sort of an outdoor arena. In 1927, the grandstand got extended to its present length, and the steel structure was clad in this very monumental brick skin that was designed to be a memorial to Iowans who died in World War I. And to me, that's an interesting story. It goes from being this kind of very ragtag event into something that really is, one of the largest performance spaces, not only in Des Moines, but in the state.
At the turn of the 20th century, America was rapidly transforming. The automobile became a symbol of modernity, progress, and wealth. The country as a whole was moving away from a rural, agricultural lifestyle to an urban, industrial economy. Women rallied for the right to vote. The Wright brothers flew their first powered airplane. Organizers of the fair saw value in looking toward the future of this new America. And Iowa's eyes turned to the skies. The Cobb & Shoe, seen here soaring above the St. Louis World's Fair, was an exhibition airship. Entrepreneur Roy Cobb & Shoe would book his airship at various activities across the country, and then arrive in time to set it up and fly it, to the amazement of a paying audience. During the 1906 fair, the Cobb & Shoe airship flew over the state capitol and atop the fairgrounds, floating miraculously in the firmament. Men refused to believe their eyes, and children stood in amazement at the floating dirigible. Aerial photography became possible and popular. People were amazed to see the fairgrounds from a new perspective. Things weren't just high, they were fast. When automobiles arrived on the scene, drivers wasted no time in pushing their limits. The dirt track racers of the early 1900s were big superstars, like today's football players or rock stars. Barney Oldfield was the first. In 1907, he brought his Peerless Green Dragon to Iowa and showed fair officials they could make a profit with auto racing. When Oldfield swung around the track at an incredible 48 miles per hour, cigar clenched in his teeth, the fair knew they had a winner. An even bigger sensation buzzed around the track in 1914. Lincoln Beachey, an American aviator and barnstormer known as the man who owns the sky, raced his airplane against Eddie Rickenbacker, a race car driver. At times, Beachey flew so low he nearly scraped the Duesenberg car. Rickenbacker lost the race, but people at the grandstand would never see a spectacle quite like it again. America's obsession with aviation continued to grow through the 1920s. A bat-winged airplane daredevil jumped from a height of 8,000 feet and flapped his way to the ground. The daring Ruth Law completed a transfer from car to an airplane in flight. With such death-defying stunts, things took an unsurprising turn when a barnstorming troop of stunt pilots, the Sons o' Guns, collided over the northeast edge of the track. One of their planes crashed into the crowd, killing one and injuring 7 others. Barkers later invited the crowds to ogle at the wreckage for 25 cents each. The Fast Times culminate in Thrill Day at the 1937 fair. 60,000 spectators filled the grandstand to see the famous Captain Frakes.
Some people consider themselves lucky to walk away from a crack-up, but not Captain F.F. Frakes. This daredevil has plane crashing down to a science, and today at the State Fair, he is trying his 27th deliberate crash. Once he has the plane at sufficient altitude, the captain will head for the house. Don't worry, it's for rent. He's all set, so hold your hats. Here we go again.
Crashing a plane on purpose is illegal, and law enforcement tried to arrest him. When the ambulance arrived to pick up the victim, Frakes had given them the slip. The Roaring '20s released an air of prosperity over the Iowa State Fair. New technologies and industries created an economic boom. Lifestyles and attitudes were changing fast. The mass production of automobiles brought a newfound sense of mobility and freedom. Cars would be transformational for the fair.
More and more people can get to Des Moines for a day, especially from neighboring counties, by automobile, and you can pack a lunch, you can camp, and so that idea of camping at the fairgrounds really starts to take off.
In the very early days of the fair, camping was perhaps the only option for overnights. When the fair settled into its permanent home, a hill in the northeast section was designated as the official camping area. Electric lights were strung in 1888, and soon, so many people were tenting that it became necessary to organize the plots, provide security, and lay down some rules. Hallooing and other unnecessary noises would not be tolerated between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m.
Well, the campground, you could get a spot anywhere, which is not true now, but you could set up a tent or just anything. We camped with my sister with a tent spread from the pickup out to the ground on bales of hay.
They used to have, and it was right behind our house, they would have permanent slabs there, and they would even sink like metal bunk beds. And then they would just, when they came, they would bring a tarp and put over their stand, their concrete slab that was there.
Campers outfitted their tents with dinner tables, shelving, and chests of drawers. In later years, campers would put up homespun decorations and hold lighting competitions. Families would stake claims to certain plots, and even to this day, camping at the fair is so popular, there's a 20-year waiting list to get in.
That group is, it's generations usually, and generations of people that camped when they were young, they camped when they raised their families started camping. Once they stake their claim, they hang on to it, their spot.
Probably 9 out of 10 campers you talk to have the best spot on the campground. And you might ask someone in a totally different area and they have the best spot at the campground. Yeah, yes, we do.
Lots of fun, lots of laughs. We've had water fights and all kinds of stuff. You know, when you've got a family and you're used to staying together and playing together, you pull tricks on people. So it's just like a fever. If you ever go the first time and camp, I guarantee you'll go back.
You don't understand the Iowa State Fair until you've seen the campgrounds. Some of them take their vacations, some of them, are here the full 2 weeks, and you really don't understand the fair until you've seen this.
It's also hard to understand the fair without knowing a little bit about agriculture. It is, after all, the reason the Iowa State Agricultural Society founded the fair in 1854. Visitors come from all over the country, even the world, to see the various breeds of livestock on display.
When you think about livestock at the Iowa State Fair, we are the livestock kings in the early 1900s. If you want your animals to be shown and be recognized, you need to enter the Iowa State Fair.
After the problems that plagued early agricultural competitions in the 1800s, qualified judges became part and parcel for the fair in the 1920s. When judging animals, they looked for proportioned body parts, outstanding traits, resilient breeds that would produce hardier stock and in turn allow the farmer to make more money from their animals. Even to this day, judging is critically important to the fair and continues to be a strong driver in the agricultural economy of Iowa.
The buyers are from all walks of life, all interested in the promotion of the great 4-H work.
Youth achievement clubs such as 4-H and FFA formed and taught a new generation how to improve their farming practices, bolster their exhibits, and showcase their talents.
We're looking at the Grand and the Reserve Champion baby beeves at the Iowa State Fair. The Grand Champion baby beef of Iowa is a Hereford weighing 1,010 pounds, raised by Herbert Olson of Beaton County.
Everyone who visits the fair can learn something new about where their food comes from and all the work that goes into producing it. One impressive display after another graces the exhibit space in the Agriculture Building. In the early days, farm families would exhibit their crops in elaborate arrangements, grain and seed bundles, fruits and vegetables, everything grown in their Iowa gardens. Today, the abundance and diversity of Iowa's agricultural products is still there. It's an opportunity for agricultural enthusiasts to learn from each other and educate the public. Farmers and gardeners from across the state can showcase their produce and compete for awards. Then and now, an award from the Iowa State Fair really means something. When most Iowans still lived on farms, the fair was an important social occasion for self-sufficient families. A chance to marvel at exhibits, participate in horseshoe pitching tournaments, and listen to John Philip Sousa's famous band. In 1929, the fair celebrated 75 years, its Diamond Jubilee. It was a record-breaking year for attendance, finances, and exhibits, only to be followed by the stock market crash in October, which would bring the Great Depression and a time of economic hardship for many farmers. How would the fair weather the storm?
You've had these rural improvement ideas that, to a degree, stem out of that progressive era of the early 1900s that start promoting youth agriculture rural life clubs. That carries us through the Depression. It carries us through the Iowa State Fair today. And it remains a place to see the latest in technology.
The progressive farmer is always interested in latest farm machinery.
Machinery halls of the early fairs, once filled with buggies, plows, harrows, reapers, and threshing machines, transitioned to farm trucks, tractors, and trailers with an endless array of accessories. The Varied Industries building would become a place to shop for anything a modern farmer or homemaker would need: milking machines, washing machines, and even a house.
So the fair remains a place that highlights innovation through the 1920s and 1930s.
Innovation and experimentation also became prevalent in the art salon at the Iowa State Fair. The best attended art exhibit in Iowa, it was the place for painters to show their work. One of those painters was Grant Wood, a regionalist artist famous for his iconic works of American culture. Wood dominated the competition in the art salon for 4 consecutive years. Regionalism grew in popularity throughout the 1930s with its realistic and detailed depictions of rural life. The artists were known to be influenced by the social and political currents of the time.
Politics have always been kind of just under the surface at the fair, and the art competition had tended to be a pretty conservative affair, still lifes and paintings of animals and things like that. In the 30s, especially as the Depression took hold, a lot of artists were painting themes that were more political.
Following his success at the fair, regionalist painter Dan Rhodes was asked to create a mural in the Agriculture Building as a Works Progress Administration project. It depicted the history of Iowa in 110 feet and would take a year to paint.
And Dan Rhodes in particular painted a mural that showed Iowan farmers sort of hardworking and suffering a little bit, as many were in the 30s. And the reaction to this was really swift. A lot of people had a cultural problem with it. They thought that the mural made Iowans look a little bit bedraggled. But there was also a political subtext.
Fair Secretary Lloyd Cunningham called the work an insult to Iowa farmers because it depicted them as club-footed, coconut-headed, barrel-necked, and low-browed.
Some politicians thought that the fact that one of the characters was holding a sheaf of wheat in their left hand was a political symbol, and tried to claim that this was sort of a secret communist propaganda being brought into the fair.
After only 8 years, the Fair Board called for its removal, the lumber used in patchwork around the fairgrounds.
After that went back to a very sort of conservative form of judging. The themes that were allowed or that were premiated were no longer those of kind of farmers laboring or struggling.
There's often criticism of public art, and in this case, the public art in the Agriculture Building, we don't have that around to appreciate anymore or decide whether it should have lasted.
And now to the Women's and Children's Building, where the champion babies are selected by critical judges. Here's the winner, champion Joanne Lewis of Iowa. Her mother and father, Mr. and Mrs. Lyle Lewis of Forest City, Iowa, are tremendously proud of this day, and they may well be.
In 1911, Mary T. Watts of Audubon was more impressed with the livestock at her county fair than with the children. This would not do, so she proposed a contest to promote healthy infant development. Her Iowa idea, the Healthy Baby Contest, was instantly popular. Large numbers of parents would submit their children for inspection and scrutiny. Curious fairgoers could view the judging through a glass window.
And doctors and nurses took precise measurement of their body and their weight, and they even had some simple psychological tests, and the idea was to assess the babies in some ostensibly scientific way, rather than merely to have a beautiful baby contest.
The scorecards were modeled after livestock competitions, but with the necessary changes to meet the requirements for the human body. A baby could lose points for mosquito bites, birthmarks, and bruises.
The baby contests, unfortunately, quickly got very bound up with the idea of eugenics, which was very popular among many Americans in the early 20th century. And that, of course, is a much grimmer and uglier history.
The Healthy Baby Contests were put on hold during the polio epidemic and eventually ended.
The Healthy Youth Contest, and that was connected to the 4-H. And one of the goals of the Healthy Youth Contest was to demonstrate that farm youths were fitter, right? Healthier, more strapping than their enervated urban counterparts. Sometimes the results in that contest didn't confirm that hope, but I think there was a great concern in the early 20th century that women and young people were becoming disenchanted with farm life. And the 1920s especially is a moment that there's just almost a head-on collision, right, between urban and rural America. And I think some farmers, people who live in rural America, they can feel as though the prestige of being a farmer and a producer is slipping, and they can feel the difference between life in town with its amenities and opportunities and the comparatively isolated life on the farm. And I guess they also encourage people to not forget that in tough times, a little bit of enjoyment, a little bit of levity might not be a bad thing. But it was very, very difficult. The fair went deep into the hole for a few years in the early 1930s.
And how do you get people coming to the fair in a Great Depression? Oh, let's have another locomotive crash.
Crash of 2 locomotives at the Iowa State Fair.
Joe Connolly returned to stage one more train crash at the fair. It was 1932, an election year. Democrat Franklin Roosevelt was up against Iowa's own Republican, Herbert Hoover. Open cans of fuel in the cars made for a terrific explosion.
It's one of the, again, the biggest days at the fairgrounds that year. It's devastating. I think one of the engineers is injured jumping off the train.
There are no winners here, but it will be a different story in November.
Just as America was crawling out of the Great Depression, a new hurdle for the fair took shape when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941.
The State Fair Board, knowing that rubber is going to be rationed or is being rationed, gasoline is being rationed, foodstuffs are being rationed, recognizes that it would be irresponsible and at the request of the War Department decides to cancel the 1942 fair.
The fair turned its fireproof buildings over to the Army Air Corps to be used as a World War II supply depot. As part of the agreement between the Fair Board and the United States government, the grounds would be leased for $1 for the duration of the war. Building and ground superintendent Henry Dietz and his son Floyd, who would later become superintendent himself, lived on the fairgrounds and helped ensure the fair's property remained intact.
There wasn't anything that would do any damage to the buildings. We all had credentials. Everybody had credentials. It was pretty well guarded. There wasn't much publicity on it. But it was quite an experience working all that stuff.
The Army filled many of the large buildings and barns with supplies and equipment. The administration building housed the main offices of the Army Air Corps.
And all this had to be put back after they moved out of there. And that was my job, to help Dad do that. I think the Fair Board and the state wanted to do something for the cause, you know. They didn't want the money. They wanted to do something to help. We all did.
For the next 4 years, from 1942 to 1945, Iowa would not hold its annual grand tradition. And when the fair returned, things would change.
It was a blow, of course, to not have the fair for a few years. But when it came back, it was facing a different customer base, a much younger country, a country that was getting used to the idea of things like television and entertainments that maybe didn't involve driving for 3 hours to get to Des Moines. So it had to evolve.
After a wartime hiatus, in the summer of 1946, the fair was back. The period that followed World War II brought great changes to America. People found economic prosperity. The rural and urban divide grew. And there was a new sense of optimism for the future of the country.
All heck breaks loose because A, it's the centennial of the state year, but also we are now at peace. The musical State Fair is released that year too.
Rodgers and Hammerstein won an Academy Award for the musical adaptation of Phil Stong's novel, State Fair.
Our state fair is a great state fair. Don't miss it, don't even delay.
A nostalgic and heartwarming portrayal of rural Midwestern life, the musical put the Iowa State Fair on the national stage.
So when you talk about Iowans in that post-World War II period, there's excitement And there's also, again, transformation. You haul your livestock not by train, but you might take them on your own in a truck to Des Moines to exhibit at the State Fair. More and more farm families are finding leisure time because they're starting to specialize a little bit more. You've got electricity in your farmhouse.
We take you now to the Iowa State Fair, a great fair celebrating the centennial of a great state.
With electricity came radio and a connection to the outside world. The media began to play a bigger and bigger role in the fair, no longer just reporting on what happened, but bringing the fair to a wider audience as it's happening.
The Midway is packed with activity, Ferris wheels, freaks, and fan dancers. Here the 4-H Club boys and girls bring their livestock to be judged for prize awards.
The 1946 fair brought a new and powerful medium.
We brought television to Iowa for the first time. We had the International Harvester tent. It was a great, big, beautiful tent right by the Varied Industries building just south. And inside the tent were television sets, big consoles with about a 9-inch black and white screen. And there were probably 25 or 30 of them around the inside of the tent. So the people would come in, they'd look at the television set. Miracle! We'd never seen television. They'd look up on the stage and we would introduce acts. And of course, people from all over the grounds wanted to come and be on television.
200,000 people went through the International Harvester tent that year. Through his work in radio and TV, Bill Riley eventually earned the unofficial title Mr. State Fair.
What a day, what a day, what a crowd, what a show. This is going to be the most wonderful experience we've had in a long time.
He was fascinated by talented people, especially young people, and started the Bill Riley Talent Search.
You picked a fine time to leave me, Lucille, before hungry children and a crop in the field. Thank you.
The idea came to my father in the late 50s. The beauty of the show is it runs exactly like it did when it first started.
Performers taking the stage have already won a local or county competition and are hoping to be named the Talent Search Champion on the last day of the fair.
Hey, if you're not selected today, you're going to be disappointed. Of course. But let that just be there for a short time and then turn it around and don't be discouraged.
We humans love to watch each other perform, whether it's in a sporting event or at the theater.
I love you, baby.
I think people love to watch children especially perform. It gives you, new energy. It makes you feel young again, if you will.
It's hard to understate what that contest has done for young people in Iowa, because it's really inspired kids from the time they were 8 or 10 years old to enter these contests. And there's been bands, there's been dancers. It's a phenomenal contest. And I think when people go to that fair and they watch those Iowa kids do that, and they, it's like, oh my goodness, this kid's not performing like back home. This is like big time stuff. And it really strikes them what a training ground that's been.
For many, the fair provides a reconnection with the past. During the 1950s, people were especially nostalgic. They also wanted to celebrate the centennial of the fair in a big way. The 1954 festivities began with a horse caravan. Starting in Fairfield, 509 people, 471 horses, and 40 covered wagons traveled the 114 miles to Des Moines. It took them 4 days, and they camped overnight in the towns along the way.
And for the whole town basically to put on their buckskins and bonnets and, you know, hit the road with the horses and buggies. And of course, in the 50s, it was still close enough to horse-drawn farming that all those men knew how to work horses.
It was extremely hot. One of the few things I remember is the clackety-clack of the horses, because there were hundreds of horses. So it was estimated that 500,000 people witnessed the caravan from Fairfield to Des Moines, 500,000 people.
Over 20,000 people gathered in the grandstand to honor the wagon train's arrival, officially opening the 1954 fair. Throngs of people, unprecedented media attention, an Academy Award-winning musical. The post-war fair had found a place in the national spotlight. Even before Iowa's role as first in the nation for presidential campaigning, politics would be inevitable.
It's 1954 when President Eisenhower visits and brings along former Iowan, former President Herbert Hoover.
Eisenhower met with 4-H members and gave a speech discussing the challenges facing farmers.
And there's even a little bit of upset because it had been discussed that nobody would be able to get into the fair without paying admission. So President Eisenhower covered the admission for him and President Hoover.
He gave $1 to Governor Beardsley for his 50-cent admission and 50 cents for Hoover. There's an argument about what happened to that dollar. Fair Secretary Lloyd Cunningham claimed he got it. Others say it's in the Century Vault. That vault is a 20-foot time capsule called the Centurlawn Spire of Time. It was created to celebrate the fair's centennial, and it's to be opened in 2054. Now thinking about its future, what will the fair need to consider in the next 100 years?
As America changed, as Iowa changed, the fair had to think about how does it market itself, how does it stay true to what it always had been as an agricultural event, but again, how does it bring in people from the city?
The fair needed a manager who knew both entertainment and agriculture, someone who understood people and how to improve the fair-going experience. Kenneth Folk was named secretary manager in 1962.
Well, my dad accepted the job as the manager of the fair, and the requirement of being the manager of the fair is that you live on the fairgrounds. So we loaded up all of 5 kids, and we had animals that we had at our acreage, and we brought them all with us. He was a huge agriculture guy. When you bring about his background, he would judge cattle. So he wanted to have the top shows. He wanted to have the top quality. He was always about quality, even on concessions. It wasn't about the amount, but it was about promoting the products of Iowa and the quality products of Iowa.
That's a smoky monkey.
He was the first of the fair managers to realize how important it was to sell that whole show. He had to sell it beyond a farm audience and small town audience. I mean, he had to take it to the city and appeal to urban people and to tourists coming to Iowa.
Boy, you're Dickens on this thing, aren't you?
We gotta be.
Folk was not afraid to make a change or try something new. One idea he had was closing Grand Avenue to traffic. The change would relieve the miles-long traffic jams that plagued the entrance into the fair. It transformed into the now famous Grand Concourse.
He wanted to get the cars off the road, and so that people would have a safer and a better experience. He knew the flow of people, and so if you look at an area of a fair, maybe it's not the best traveled, well, how do you get people to go up to that, to spread people out and to get more movement?
New attractions were added every year, like Heritage Village, which included a Fort Madison blockhouse replica and an exact replica of the first church ever built in Iowa. In 1968, the North Lincoln Country School, once located south of Indianola, was donated to the fair. It remains furnished, just as it was in the late 1800s.
Is that what you tell people? Come out here
Oh,
and spend
yeah.
money?
No, we never tell them to spend money. We tell them to come out and see everything.
Enjoy it.
And you can see thousands and thousands of things and never spend a penny once you get on the fairgrounds.
Marketing the fair, as we know it now, got its start by giving the fair a new theme every year. The heritage fairs of the 1960s celebrated explorers, pioneers, the gay 90s, and roaring 20s. The 70s fairs were about discovering cultures, Iowa, Mexico, Canada, and Hawaii.
It was a way, again, to bring newness to the fair and awareness of different cultures.
Iowa was not immune to the changes in American culture in the 1960s. An explosion of rock and roll music, counterculture ideas, and anti-war sentiment had transformed the country in the span of a decade.
With the youth movements in the 60s, the fair tended to be seen as kind of a conservative, your parents' event, and they began to lose a lot of the youth demographic that had been really important to them.
Teen Town was created for teenagers by teenagers.
I went to East High and I was on All City Student Council, and we would meet with all of the other leaders, council members from the different schools. And so he brought this idea of something for the teenagers to do, which I think was great.
And I remember my friends and I came regularly to that. And it was an enclosed area where the teens gathered. We would see people we knew, and we would look for new people to get to know.
You couldn't be over 18 to go in. And I think that's the people my age are still coming to the fair. A lot of people went to Teen Town. They had bands and they had dances, and it was a place that everybody could go.
It wasn't rowdy, it was just a lot of people from a lot of different areas would come together and dance.
I think it was to bring the rural and urban together. It's really to bring back the essence of what Iowa is all about, the history and the legacy.
The other thing that was big were the fireworks. You would have, all of a sudden, an Iowa corn stalk. You would have Niagara Falls. You would have whoever was entertainer that night, they would do their face in fireworks. And then they would have like a boat that you would see going across, and it's on the back of a truck, but it would be fireworks and it's moving. The fireworks were amazing.
A lot bigger than last year, aren't they?
Oh, yeah, the flags are?
Let's see, this is a ship.
That's Mayflower.
That's a Mayflower. That's a Mayflower ship.
Entertainment was where Ken Folk really shined. He wanted to bring big crowds to the fair, so he went after big names. The first was Iowa native Andy Williams. Williams played 5 nights in 1965 and was a huge success.
Can't get used to losing you no matter what I try to do.
A string of big-name performers would follow.
Well, you wonder why I always dress in black.
The superstars are on your horizon at the New Horizon 77 Iowa State Fair.
Jolene, 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 Jolene.
Sunday, August 21st. Enjoy.
I think Andy Williams, this is what my dad says as a story. He went back to Hollywood, told people if you want to get on, if you really want to have big crowds and revenue, good revenue, you should get on the fair circuit. It was a start of really saying that we can have those kind of entertainers coming, and it gives them a venue, and they could be outside and everybody can take part in it.
You wanted to find entertainers that hopefully were either old-time, popular entertainers that people knew immediately when you said their name, or you wanted new and up-and-coming artists.
Big-name grandstand performers are a mainstay. Even today, fairgoers anxiously await the announcement of the next fair's lineup. So when a grandstand artist cancels, the fair has to find a sub or cancel the show. In 1990, it was Ricky Van Shelton who had to cancel.
The decision was made to take a chance on this new artist. And so the day of the show, I go over and immediately I see this gentleman in a large cowboy hat, and he walks right up to me and sticks out his hand and says, "Hi, Jan, I'm Garth Brooks." Within, I don't even think a year, he was at the top of the charts.
How does Iowa celebrate its favorite performers, characters, and animals? We cast them in butter and put them on display next to the butter cow, the beloved and iconic symbol of the Iowa State Fair. The butter cow has been a feature of the fair since the early 1900s, but the tradition of creating figures out of butter dates back even further.
There was a woman named Carolyn Shock Brooks that just started sculpting her butter to sell it. She was an artist by nature. She just loved sculpting. And it just became quirky enough that she gained fame. And then she toured the world. Like, she became very famous in that sense.
In Caroline's days, transporting, exhibiting, and preserving her sculptures was a challenge. She created her works in flat metallic milk pans, which she set in larger pans filled with ice. If her sculptures needed to travel, she had to ensure an ice supply along the way. While other industries occasionally use their products to make art, nothing is as popular as the butter cow. People flock to the agriculture building to see it.
We're here in one of the freeze lockers at the Iowa State Fair with Mrs. Norma Lyon and the cow.
Yes, all 350 pounds of her.
You, I understand, make this buttered cow every year for the fair?
Yes, this is the 15th one I've made for Des Moines.
Why?
Oh, I like to do it.
For 46 years, Norma Lyon sculpted the butter cow at the Iowa State Fair. She also sculpted Elvis, American Gothic, and The Last Supper. Norma, also known as Duffy, was a dairy farmer and studied animal science and sculpture at Iowa State University.
Well, in '59, I saw a picture of the fella just before me. I went in and I can do better than that. And I wasn't thinking about taking a job or anything. I was still raising my family, and in '60, it was all my job.
Norma definitely emphasized the details and very much wanted the butter cow to be the ideal show cow. If you march the butter cow through the champion ring, it should win. She was very particular about all the anatomy that made a dairy cow good and strong and healthy.
The heads are the hardest for me to do, and to get that eye just right is real painstaking, and I have to go outside and see what it looks like.
For the past 6 years, Duffy has had a willing butter carving apprentice, Sarah Doyle. And what do you like about butter sculpture?
I just like spending time with Norma and learning about sculpting. I love art.
It was a very gradual process, which I needed because she would tell people, this is Sarah, she's gonna take over someday. And I'd say, oh, no. And so I think that she instinctively knew, would prove it to me little by little with giving me more responsibility. The last time the butter was replaced was 2005, which was her last year. So the butter, a lot of the butter, we've added to it, but a lot of the butter has been touched with her hands as well. I do feel like there's a part of the cow specifically that is nostalgic, that's somewhat unchanging, even though it's a different cow each year. I really see that being parallel to what the fair is about and what we do, in every quadrant of the fair, celebrating the past, but bringing in what's new and good and exciting about Iowa now.
Iowa in the 1980s was big, bold, and vibrant. Big food, bright clothing, and extreme creativity. Iowans are known for their skill at making something extraordinary out of everyday items. From the ridiculous to the sublime, Once you paid your gate admission, there were hundreds of things to see and do without spending another dime.
Got him with a good uppercut that time.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's showtime.
Things were hot literally and figuratively. The 1983 fair still holds the record for being the hottest.
Got to mention that these steers are hot. It's probably close to 100 degrees down here on the floor of this pavilion.
Racing continued to be the most serious of all state fair attractions.
And they're off and running across the plains of Iowa. But some of the people have tents flying out of the back of their wagons.
And we're going to run these bathtubs through an obstacle course over here, and there'll be about 8 inches of water in each tub when we start, and hopefully we'll have 7 inches of water in the tub after we get done the obstacle course.
No form of entertainment was too destructive, too mundane,
This is the exciting part now, folks.
or too absurd.
There's Lofton racing coming around that first corner. It's number 5 on top. Here comes one on the inside. It's 5 and 1, and there we are.
Set, go.
The spirit of competition runs high at the fair. Our urge to compete is part of human nature. It plays a role in our survival, drives innovation, increases efficiency. Many of the fair's contests are long-standing traditions that are still held today. Others live on only in our memories.
First, we're going up to Heritage Hill for that unique sport, rolling pin throwing.
Rolling pin throwing contests had been around since at least the 1920s. In this test of state fair strength, women of all ages and abilities would throw a 2-pound rolling pin as hard and as far as they could. Pioneer Hall spectators saw rolling pins flying dazzling distances for several years.
Now, this is not a practical rolling pin. It doesn't spin, but it throws. So you can get a lot of torque when you snap your wrist.
According to the Guinness Book of World Records, the Iowa State Fair is home to the farthest flung rolling pin ever.
Lori Adams throwing it 175 feet, 5 inches. She's from Iowa State. She's a softball catcher, and she knows how to sling it.
You can see my brother coming over and giving me a high five, and my grandma patting me on the back.
It was a lot of fun, but was it safe?
And everybody would scream when some lady would let go too late or too early, and the 2-pound rolling pin would go careening into the crowd.
Oh, you're the patrol car killer too.
Well, they were parked down there, and they were warned that there was this possibility that they would be hit. But they just didn't believe us until the rolling pin bounced off of the sidewalk and knocked the antenna off of the car.
One particular year, that happened several times.
I got the bob.
Where did you get hit?
You want to see? Right there.
Oh, down in your tummy.
Yeah.
So we thought about it, and the rubber chicken developed that we toss now.
The rubber chicken, the most dignified and aerodynamic of all fair birds.
It was soft, and we could fill it so that it was heavy, and then that's what we have used ever since. We have not come up with a better way.
Sports had become so serious, and they were in high school, and they were even more so in college. But at the fair, we were actually playing again. And play is what we all need, right? We are all trying our best, but we're being playful about it. And that's what's better, right? Than to try hard as you can, and then just laugh because it's just funny.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Pioneer Hall. Welcome to the Iowa State Fair. Welcome to the Beard Contest.
Hundreds of revered and loved contests connected to Iowa history have taken place at Pioneer Hall.
Pig! Pig! Pig!
Dominate that pretty little thing.
Built in 1886, it's one of the original buildings constructed for the first fair on these grounds, and is the only one that remains. Today, it's a place where you can express yourself.
Can you hear me? You get yourself in here right now! Mom! Mom!
Thankfully, most of what is heard inside Pioneer Hall is a little easier on the ears. Pioneer Hall has been home to a lot of good times and special memories. If only the good feelings could protect it from the ravages of time.
For a lot of years, this building was not maintained very well, and things began to deteriorate.
It wasn't just Pioneer Hall. Many of the fair's buildings were in need of repair, and some had already been torn down.
It became obvious, most of these major buildings were constructed World War I era up until maybe the mid-1920s. And so the fair went on, but there were no funds to perform maintenance on them. There were some buildings, in fact, a women's and children's building, they had to tear down, and that was a grand old building. And they had to close things such as the grandfather's barn because of the deterioration.
The exposition hall's demolition, I think, is a key moment where the fair, while it's beginning to realize that it has to appeal to nostalgia, that's clearly a moment where the fair has to make a decision about what it keeps. Is it a museum, or is it an ongoing event?
And some people said it would be cheaper just to buy some farmland somewhere, right, and build all new buildings. That would be more cost effective. And I thought it was marvelous that a lot of Iowans made it clear that they were very devoted to this particular spot, to the fairgrounds, and they did not want to see a new fairground suddenly erected.
Ticket sales simply could not provide enough funds for all the renovations the fairgrounds required. Several solutions were tried, with no great success. Des Moines Register writer Rox Laird wrote an op-ed insisting something had to be done about the state of the fairgrounds.
And I said, I hope everybody read that, because he was right.
His article would set in motion a series of events that would help secure the future of the Iowa State Fair. John Putney, a farmer from Gladbrook, was hired as the first director of the Iowa State Fair Blue Ribbon Foundation in 1993. His close ties to the fair, as an exhibitor, former president of the Sale of Champions, and beef superintendent, made him an excellent champion for the cause.
I never got very far from the barns. And then when I took this job, I realized a lot of people never got this far south. That became something I really had to think about. How do we take care of all these different areas? The one thing that I wanted to make sure of is that we had no more false starts. And that what we had to do is we had to inform and educate the public, not the doom and gloom. We didn't want them worrying about bricks falling off buildings. We wanted to show them how important this was to Iowa and our culture and our heritage and our future.
Putney's plan worked. The Blue Ribbon Foundation soon had enough support to begin restoring some of the fair's older buildings. they were able to add some of the comforts and conveniences modern fairgoers expected.
And that, I think, has led to a really interesting mix on the fairgrounds of old buildings that are often in immaculate shape, very well preserved, and new buildings that do some similar things.
And I think they've also helped connect people throughout the whole state to the fairgrounds in a greater way, too. When you invest in it, you get more, you're more a part of it.
One of the newer buildings on the grounds is the Elwell Family Food Center, a 15,000 square foot space dedicated to housing a multitude of food competitions. Food contests have been a part of the fair since 1854, though it wasn't until the 20th century that the blue ribbon became the sought-after prize that it is today. Through the 1970s, the divisions were the basics: cakes, pies and breads, canned vegetables, pickles, jams, and jellies. Today, there are hundreds of divisions and classes to enter. Thousands of foods are judged every year.
See, there, that was a nice, good pop.
It's a huge undertaking. Some people bring multiple entries.
As high as 300.
From one person?
Yes. And I don't know how they do it, but they do it.
How many entries is your daughter going to bring to the fair?
She brought today, we entered for her because she's home baking bread like mad, a honey division she's working on. We entered 127 entries for her.
Arlette Hollister served as the superintendent of foods at the Iowa State Fair for more than 30 years.
It's fun to see them bring their things, and they're so proud of them. This is their baby. They've made it, This is something they have done.
Popcorn cake, and popcorn treats.
And I tell everybody the first time that they enter that it is addictive. And sure enough, the next year they said, "You're right, it is addictive."
She was masterful at keeping the traditional contests going, while at the same time allowing the competition to evolve by adding new categories.
I try to have a lot of children's contests because if we don't get them when they're young, someday we're not going to have anybody.
What did you name it?
The disgustingness.
Disgustingness?
Yeah.
Cinnamon rolls are one of the biggest contests with the biggest prize.
I got invited to come judge cinnamon rolls at the fair. And I did that for a number of years. I can remember going in and having like 70 rolls that are entered in the contest. And most of them made those that morning. And I'd have to take a bite. I felt like I had to take a bite of every one of them. I would take a knife and a fork and I'd cut in and I'd pull a little square of the center of the roll out and sample them, and then I would somehow pick the top 3.
Too light on the cinnamon, too dry.
And then I would get the recipe from the winner and I would use it in my column in the next day's paper.
I chose this one as first place. The name is Mary Rooney. You made these? Oh, it's great.
And this is our 3,000.
It's a big deal to win that contest. And Marianne Carlson did it not just once, but twice.
Oh, that was the most exciting thing I'd ever have had happen to me.
I'm amazed every year at what I see. It's just a learning experience to see what other people do.
We're not going to badmouth one another.
No, absolutely not. That's not what the fair is about.
No.
It can be tense. But what I notice is that after the decisions are made, there are almost never arguments afterwards. Well, I guess that's what the fairs are all about.
I love it. It's fun. I have a passion for it, and I love to go and see people. It's fun.
The 1990s racetrack was a place for mullets, muscle, and extreme motorsports.
1, 2, 3 times at least over.
Here he comes down to the ramp and up and over and
on the front tires.
But he's rough and he's tough. He's only got 3 turbochargers. He's in a big class with a lot of big tractors. He's throwing water over the track. He's headed for that 300-foot mark. He's getting closer, and he got the job done.
Getting ready for the Russian Dynamite death chair, and indeed it is. Mike Davis getting ready to sit down, get this, on 4 sticks of dynamite. And you can see nothing left of the chair, and Mike Davis really came rolling out of there.
Elsewhere, fairgoers were bonding over shared musical tastes, exploring the magic of the Midway. And finding a renewed sense of enjoyment in that rural way of life. Attendance records were shattered for several years running, and the fair again attracted national attention. Martin Mull and Comedy Central filmed a farce on the fairgrounds with Fred Willard.
So you and Fred, what are you going to do there? You're going to broadcast live? You're going to do reports?
Just kind of do a report on what's going on in the center of this great country of ours.
Now, you're not going to be out there making fun of those people, are you? Because that's the heartland. You don't want to do that.
I can't speak for Fred, but I know that I'm going to go in there with just the biggest grin you've ever seen.
At the turn of the 21st century, the efforts of the Iowa State Fair's Blue Ribbon Foundation were paying off. There were tens of thousands of things to do and see, thousands of blue ribbons to be won, and food stands as far as the eye could see. Lots of folks, famous or not, decided the fair was worth a visit. In 2002, attendance surpassed 1 million visitors during its 11-day run for the first time. The milestone was attributed to good weather, popular grandstand acts, and new attractions. The New York Times took notice and included the Iowa State Fair in its best-selling travel book, 1,000 Places to See Before You Die.
Good to see so many friends and friendly faces. I think back with fond memories my travels through this beautiful state, and I mean, it's a beautiful state.
Another part of this that became a deal in the later part of the fair was the importance politically of the fair.
President Gerald Ford visited during his first year in office, touring the grounds, visiting exhibits, and meeting with local farmers and leaders. He gave a speech emphasizing the importance of agriculture to our nation's economy.
And the American farmer stands 10 feet tall in his contributions to this nation's greatness.
Excited Iowans filled the grandstand to see the president in person.
We hosted Barack Obama here as president, and the plan was that they will buy their tickets. You gotta buy your ticket. Politicians don't get in free, and come through the gate and we'll greet them. Well, as they got up to the window to buy the tickets, the president reaches for his pocket and he's like, uh-oh, I don't have any money. And Tom Vilsack did not miss a beat. He said, that's okay, Mr. President, let me buy. And he pulls out the money and he pays for the tickets.
The Iowa State Fair is kind of the center of the universe every 4 years when it's presidential election time. It just is.
And if I can measure...
President Jimmy Carter campaigned extensively in Iowa. He visited the fair in 1976, the first of the Iowa State Fair political frenzies leading up to a presidential election.
From the Iowa State Fairgrounds in Des Moines, Election 88. The Democratic presidential candidates debate the economics of America.
It's the 1980s when really the Iowa State Fair in August becomes, to a degree, ground zero for political appearances related to the Iowa caucuses and playing a real national role.
I'm going to support a legal immigration system that puts a priority on the...
And then the Register stepped up and had the soapbox, the old soapbox idea of standing up and having your say. And they'd built these stages on bales of hay.
Every candidate handles it differently. some candidates decide maybe it's too risky to go to the soapbox and have people that close to you.
I am not intimidated by you, sir, or anyone else out there. I will fight for the American people over.
But it is a place for a political reporter to go and watch the candidate interact with an audience that has not been screened or pre-selected or vetted by the campaign.
I'll tell you what, I've never known the fair to be this crowded.
Hundreds of thousands of people visit the fair, and many of them are Iowa voters and caucus goers. Presidential candidates come to the fair hoping a strong performance will lead to success.
Will you caucus for me? I would love to do that, as long as you have the side of the robotics, the technology people are talking for you, right? Absolutely.
I'll never forget, one of my favorite moments was Bernie Sanders is running, and he was speaking on the soapbox that day.
I remember when Donald Trump came. It was in that time period where people didn't see Donald Trump as the eventual nominee. And he landed his helicopter right outside the fairgrounds in one of those parking areas out there. And after he was done taking a few questions, he says to his supporters, a lot of whom had kids with them, because again, it's the fair, right? It's the Iowa State Fair. He said, "Okay, kids, who wants a ride in the helicopter?"
Bernie's up speaking on the soapbox. And all of a sudden, there's this racket overhead, and you look up, and here comes the Trump helicopter.
Well, there's Donald Trump. What can we do?
You couldn't hear him. I mean, it was chop, 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 chop. And Bernie's up there on the stage just going, oh my God.
It feels like even as the world of politics and the world of journalism has changed dramatically over the past 20, 25 years, the Iowa State Fair hasn't changed that much. The soapbox still looks like the soapbox, but it's still a candidate on a stage talking to an audience that's just a few feet away from them.
What are you going to do for me to vote for you? I'm a farmer, I'm a rancher. What are you going to do to get my vote?
And that feels like old school politics. And when you're there watching it, it still feels plenty relevant and plenty important.
Governor, is it time for a corn dog?
No, I'm not doing the corn dog in front of you guys. That's one of my rules.
Oh my God. You like it?
Food has always been an important part of going to the fair. In the early days, folks would pack a picnic to spread out and eat on the lawn.
And so today, a lot of the open space is taken up with what are some of my favorite pieces of architecture at the fair, the food stands, some of which are really novel and really interesting, all competing to try to grab your attention. All, of course, paying concession fees, which helps the fair stay afloat, taking up the space that was formerly kind of promenade space, right? Space where you would lay out a blanket and, enjoy the peace and quiet of the fair.
Many of the food stands are family businesses, and many of those have been serving food here for decades.
We present the corn dog.
The corn dog is the most iconic food at the fair and a ritual for many fairgoers.
And I don't know that one person can actually, say, oh, I started the corn dogs. Maybe not. It's just who was able to make it into something that was actually doable and good and stayed consistent.
Helen's dad, Melvin Little, was the first to serve corn dogs at the Iowa State Fair in 1954.
When they first came out with the corn dogs, you had your fryer like this, and then you had a wheel on the front of it that had little holes in it that you could put a stick into. So you would take the corn dog and you would get the batter on it, then you'd dip it into the grease to get it set, and then you'd have to whip it up, burn your fingers obviously, and stick them into this wheel so that you had this thing that went around like this on the front of the fryer where the people were walking by you so that they could see this. Then in our stands, we used to have to yell our slogan, get your educated poncho dog, rides a stick, swims in grease, and wears an overcoat. You bite it, it won't bite you. We didn't like doing it. So we wouldn't do it until we saw his red hat coming through the crowd, because you'd be watching for that. Then you'd start yelling something. Then as soon as he would leave, then you'd be quiet again and be cute.
Easy cleanup, no mess, and portability. Corn dogs solved a great number of fair food inconveniences. Through the 20th century, concessionaires began to realize the potential of really putting anything on a stick. Want to eat a sweet, sticky treat in the middle of summer, hassle-free while heading up to Pioneer Hall? Simply put it on a stick. Problem solved.
But we did put everything on a stick, because I said everything's better, I guess, on a stick. The only thing I don't do on a stick usually is the apple. I slice it. That's just part of the fair.
We're going to conduct the first ever interview on a stick. Lindsay Gruters of Indianola, Iowa, intends to eat her way through all 49 items in 10 days, which begs the question, are you insane?
Pretty much, but I love the fair. This sucker is huge.
Is there a way to make the fair taste even better? Offer free admission and a free corn dog to 11,000 people, like at the 2008 Corn Dog Chomp.
But it was an attempt to set a Guinness World Record for the most number of people eating a corn dog at one time. And it was on the first day of the fair.
Vendors had to scramble to get that many corn dogs ready at the same time and distribute them to the grandstand crowd.
3, 2, 1.
So it was a very, very unique way to open up the fair and get a lot of people in on your first day.
I come here to eat my way through the fair. I've been doing it for close to 60 years now, so.
I'm having the Coconut Mountain. I don't even know what it is, but I'm having it because I love coconut.
We try to come up with something new every year. And have fun during the off season, so to speak, trying to come up with new products.
There's no pressure to do something new. It is beneficial to do something new if it's a great item. I always say you have to be very prepared if you're going to do a new item and you win on production. I think it just tastes better here. I don't know.
Is the food at the fair special because even as we pushed the limits of reasonable consumption, we couldn't help learning something about where all that delicious food came from?
There are so many young people today that are only one generation removed from the farm and have never been on a farm. We want to bring them here to the fair and show them the Animal Learning Center, how we take care of our livestock, how we take care of our pigs and our cattle and our poultry, and they become educated on where their family have come from. We need to always keep that agricultural sense about the fair.
Like the family farm, attending the fair is a cherished tradition that's been passed down through generations of Iowans. So when the COVID pandemic forced the fair to cancel, many were disappointed.
I know it'll be a long 14 months until the next Iowa State Fair, and it seems like it's been 14 months just in the last 2. 2020 was one of the most difficult parts of my whole career, no doubt about it.
It was just an interesting perspective to see August in a different way, and it made us all miss the fair and realize what an incredible treasure we had. So it's one of those things that there is a silver lining in a sense of what it taught you, and how much you enjoy the fair.
If history has taught us anything, it's that despite war, weather, or in recent cases, pandemics, the Iowa State Fair can survive. As long as people find value in the thousands of things to see and do, the fair will continue to grow and prosper well into the future.
I just hope that the love and the joy that people have of bringing their family to the fair and introducing new people to the fair continues. Because it is such a unique festival that brings so many varieties together.
Fair Week is unlike the other 51 weeks of the year, right? It's a chance to get away from home and to do something very, very different.
And it's the most fun people-watching place you can ever go in your whole life.
And I always think everybody ought to have a goal of entering something in the state fair or doing something at the state fair.
I just enjoy seeing people set up. It's amazing how fast they set up and how fast they can tear down. It's just amazing to me. And just the excitement, the overall excitement.
There are great state fairs out there, right? But the world knows about the Iowa State Fair, and I think that's because of politics. That guarantee that the national spotlight, the media following presidential candidates, brings us right into the middle of that fairgrounds. And it has mattered.
I would keep everything the same. I hope that there's always a sense for the fair of holding on to tradition, but not too tightly.
I would do anything for the Iowa State Fair because I don't know what anybody would do without it.
That heart, it's everywhere here at the fair. When I go to Pioneer Hall, it's in the fiddle contest. It's in the children's mom calling contest. It's in the tall corn growing contest. It's with the moms and dads watching their kids show livestock in 4-H and FFA. They're here to be entertained. They're here to remember and relive. You ask where the heart is, it's everywhere, but it's individually everywhere with each person.
It's about the things that change and the things that stay the same. The story of the Iowa State Fair is a story of an idea that began as an experiment and turned into something extraordinary.
Funding for this program was provided by Friends, the Iowa PBS Foundation, as well as generations of families and friends who feel passionate about the programs they watch on Iowa PBS.